And gentlemen, the start of the season from, I don't know if you want to call it start of the season from hell, absolute disaster, however you want to put it. We are 2 and 12. This is about as bad as I possibly think things could have gone for the Sixers team to start, but we're going to break into every layer of how things have gone down south very quickly for the Sixers team. They are 2 and 12. They've lost their last 5. We got Paul George back on the injury report. We've seen a grand total of 6 minutes played between Paul George, Tyrese Maxey, and Joel Embiid on the floor together. There is a lot to get into, and with me to do it, I have my guy Jacob Moreno. So, Jacob, where's your head at right now? Because I might need someone to talk me off a ledge.
I mean, it's just like we even talked about this before stream. There's just so many issues we didn't even know where to start. I mean, you can look on the court, you can look off the court, coaching, rotations, lack of production from the bench, lack of production from the starters, lack of production from the big three. I mean, it's just a culmination of issues. And when you have all of that mixed with such little chemistry and such frustration and being such under such a dramatic microscope in the media, it's just been an absolute disaster. But even with that, they're 2 and 12. They're
Yep.
literally have the worst record in the NBA at this point. It's just it's unprecedented. Like going into the season, you knew we'd be without Embiid for a little bit, and then even Paul George for a little bit. Like they were gonna probably start maybe below 500, dip a few games, but 2 and 12 is unacceptable. I really don't care what the circumstances are. You just can't have this. And yes, it's 6:08 on November 21st, but there's a certain point where you just have to get it together. Like Milwaukee's won 4 out of their last 5. The
Yeah.
Knicks are starting to look great together. Like, yes, they're not far from the playoffs whatsoever, but when you want to compete for a top 4 or 5 seed, it's looking a little grim at the moment. That's all I got to say.
Yeah, no, you nailed a lot of that there. That regardless of how many guys bet out, I understand the injury issues have been legitimate here, and I understand that like Nick Nurse specifically has been dealt a really difficult hand. But there's no way around this team being 2 and 12 here. As there we go with the image there, 2 and 12, dead last in the entire NBA. These are bad teams that are sitting in front of them, and for the same reason that I've been optimistic about the East has been bad as a whole. There is room to grow. Well, you're kind of killing any sort of wiggle room that you have for yourself here, and for this grand plan with Joel Embiid as far as load management, that's essentially out the window because every game is going to be turning into a must-win from here. So it is still very early. That there is 83% of the season still remaining here, but they kind of have given up any sort of graces that they do have here. Now, I don't know who the number one guy to blame is. Frankly, I think you can point the finger at every single member of this team. That Joel Embiid specifically, there's plenty of things that you can go off. The being late, the team meetings, the just not looking like himself to start the season, this quote unquote plan that keeps being referred to. There's a million reasons you can dive into him. Paul George, we know the injury issues that are already popping up. That same knee being hyperextended in the span of just a couple weeks here. We did get some relatively positive news as far as Paul George goes, saying that he will miss the next 2 games and be reevaluated. To be frank here, that I do think that's a very optimistic outlook here. If I had to guess, I would expect it to be several games beyond that is my guess here, but who knows? That is good news. They're at least floating it out there. We're not seeing any sort of terms for structural damage. We've seen Tyrese Maxey miss time, and I'm still blown away for what was the point of him coming back yesterday if he can only give you 5 minutes in the first half, or that's how severe the minutes limit is. And I don't want to excuse Nick Nurse, who I'm the most fired up about that I've been at any point during his Sixers tenure so far. You nailed it. That yes, these issues are legitimate, but there's no excuse to be 2 and 12. There's no excuse to be the worst team in the league. There's still talent on this roster, and God bless Jared McCain, man. He has been like the lone bright spot here, but we can't even properly enjoy it. A dude that is legitimately doing historic things for rookie, playing so far beyond his years and has taken such a legitimate leap here. So let's keep it with Joel Embiid first here. There's been a lot talked about with Joel. Obviously, it hasn't been the start to the season that we hoped for, that he has shoved a reporter, been suspended for that, been investigated by the NBA for not playing enough games, and then when he has been on the floor until last night, he just has not looked like himself. Now, if we want to take one positive away from last night, I do think that you can squint and see, okay, there's the version of Joel Embiid that this team needs. That's probably the only positive there, but then we hear more about like this locker room stuff. We have him, and I'll dive into the quotes in a minute, but Jacob, to set you up here, what's kind of your takeaways from Joel Embiid? Most specifically, what do you think about him is kind of hindering this team to much, and how much do you lean into sort of the off-court conversations that are beginning to be had?
All right, I'm going to start with on the court. I
Mhm.
think yesterday it was a great indicator that he probably is shaking off most of the rust. But in order for him to do that, he had to play the entire third quarter.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's not a part of the plan. So That I'm just gonna put that out there. But I think offensively he looked a lot better. He looked much more confident getting to his spots in the mid range and just operating as an offensive hub in general. I think the playmaking has been severely lacking, even with the 35 and 11. I mean, injury or not, his inability to read double teams just hasn't been acceptable. He's
Mhm.
looked completely uncomfortable, like he's never faced doubles in his entire career. And obviously, we know that's far from the case. Defensively, there's still definitely a lot to be desired. Even yesterday,
Yeah.
like he looked like some Yusuf Nurkic level rim protection. Not even Carl Anthony Towns, Yusuf Nurkic. But I think it's just more about him trusting his knee, getting his legs back. He'll return to form defensively, and he's already looking like he's returned to form on the offensive end as well. And that's going to be huge for a Sixers team who's struggling to compete with the Hospital Grizzlies. So
Yeah.
they'll need all the Joel Embiid master classes they can get. As far as off the court, there's been a lot that's said, a lot of inaccuracies, a lot of accurate stuff. But in a nutshell, I think, if you're a contending team and you're trying to lead a contending team, you need to be on time to everything. And Embiid said he only missed it maybe once or twice. Obviously, you don't know if that's true or not. We don't know the context or extent of his absences or latenesses. But still, I mean, if you're trying to build a culture, especially with such a new roster, like you can only put the blame on Nick Nurse so far in terms of like leadership. Like as the leader of this team, as the cornerstone, you got to be available. You got to just give it your all. And I'm not saying Embiid's not, but you just can't be late. But on the other end of that, we saw Tyrese Maxey, call him out. But the issue I have with that is you're going to do that, which one, it seems like it seemed deserved, like all
Yeah.
flat out side. It seems like he needed to do it. But if you're going to do that, you can't come out playing hero ball in all of the 12 minutes he played yesterday.
Yeah.
Like he wasn't even looking to get Embiid the ball off the pick and roll. He was settling for contested shots, just playing straight up hero ball like we're the 2000 Lakers, which we're obviously not. So yeah, that's my overall thoughts on Embiid on and off the court in that entire situation.
Yeah, I'm not ready to hit the panic button for the on the court stuff that we know with Joel. It takes a little time, more so than is generally the case for elite caliber NBA players, that he's not a guy who can pick it up and put it down in the same way, and his body issues play into that in a major factor here. I was pretty encouraged by the on court version of what we saw, even though you're right, there's still a ways to go. Even the energy level getting up and down is not quite good enough yet, and the rim protection is absolutely lacking at this point in time. But I saw enough there that it was like, okay, he's in attack mode. There's still the version of Joel Embiid that we need in there. And what I think needs to be made clear here is, with all these new additions, with Paul George, with Caleb Martin, with Jared McCain, this is all assembled around Joel Embiid. That none of this works if your centerpiece is not capable of continuing to be the centerpiece and one of the, at minimum, 10 best players in the NBA, and 10's a little long there. That you really need him to be a top 6 period for this team to be a true championship contender. That's how this is designed. Now, the off-court stuff I do want to dig into a little deeper here. For starters, the team meeting as a whole, I love that it happened. I think Tyrese Maxey is the right version as far as talent and personality that is capable of looking Joel Embiid in the eyes and kind of responding to that. And as is typically the case, in fairness to Joel, I do think these things get blown out of proportion. And there's been a variety of takeaways. I'll start with, I hate from Paul George seeing you thumbnailing and using this as a team meeting. That is an insane move to me, but I get it. It's the content game, and this is the world we live in. It doesn't make me any less frustrated with it. I did want to reflect on a couple quotes from Joel after the fact, and I'll start out with this. This is kind of the full scale of, I saw a couple portions of this being chopped up, but shout out to Gina Mazzella of the Philadelphia Inquirer, who this is from, and from Embiid directly is, quote, "We talked about a lot of things. I don't want to get into detail, but the whole thing, that part of it took probably 40 seconds. But it's Joel Embiid, so things will always get blown out of proportion. It's whatever, though. I'll take it. I'm the reason for everything, so I guess I'll take the blame for everything. There was nothing malicious being said. I like it when people are telling me what I'm not doing good, what I need to do better. That part in the tardiness probably happened once or twice when I wasn't playing, so I need to be better. I need to be perfect. I need to be on point, which I'm going to do." And he also added this one making plenty of rounds here, or this quote here from Joel, saying that the person that leaked it is a nice little POS here. So I personally agree with Joel with this point, that I think it's pretty bananas to me that within 12 hours of this happening, this closed-door team meeting that is expected to turn around the season, we're getting direct quotes from Shams Charania for what was said and by who. So, Jacob, to throw this your way, and I see a couple comments chiming in, appreciate everybody getting involved in the conversation. We have, shout out to Reggie Driver, theorizing that it was Caleb Martin or Eric Gordon being the leak here. I personally tend to believe it is Nick Nurse. To you, Jacob, does it matter who leaked it, and are you upset about that being the fact, and what are your thoughts on Joel's kind of point there?
I'll kind of start from the beginning. I'll go to the Inquirer quote. That sounds like a person who is mentally exhausted already. And I mean, I can't even blame him. He seems, a little bit mentally defeated. I mean, that's understandable considering where the team is at, how much he's gone through in just the early portion of the season. But he also did say that he will be better and he's really not making excuses. So I think for the most part, that's what you would like to hear from Embiid. And as far as him saying the person leaking is a POS, I completely agree. I mean, that was supposed to be a closed door meeting where
Yep.
they resolve things and try to get back on track. And leaking it was just completely counterintuitive to that. Now there's even more drama. Now there's even more media people poking around looking for quotes. And I don't know if you saw this, like the account Kicks like made a whole like clickbait thing saying Embiid struck back at Tyrese Maxey. Like it's just unnecessary stuff that
Yeah.
the team just doesn't need right now, especially given the situation. But as far as who leaked it, I mean, it could be a lot of different things. It could be like a rotational player trying to like get some street cred with Shams. It could be Nick Nurse. It could be somebody in the coaching staff. Like it could be Rich Paul somehow. I'm not saying it was Tyrese Maxey, but Rich Paul is very resourceful and has
Yeah.
a lot of connections. But I think it just sucks regardless. But if it is the coach, then I think there's a whole other issue there. So yeah.
Yeah, and you're right. It absolutely could be anyone. Like, for example, there is for all the new pieces, the Eric Gordons, the Caleb Martins of the world. There's not this undying loyalty to Joel Embiid or the team yet. Like, there's no reason for there to be, as you've been here for a cup of coffee, and it's been a pretty unpleasant one so far. That I get not having this like loyalty to keep it between the walls or keep it within the family or however you want to put it with this team. That it gets established over time, and we clearly have seen that there's been just about none of that between this team playing together. So I understand this is not the locked tight team that we would hope it would be, but that's sort of probably kind of the problem that we're entirely talking about. Now, the reason that I say Nick Nurse here is whenever there's the leaks like this, I try to think to who does this benefit or why would this even come out in the first place? I think Nick Nurse is sick of all the drama. I think he's like, this is not what I signed up for. I signed up to coach a basketball team. You can tell by the way he's handling himself throughout this entire like preseason training camp, start of the regular season, at all the questioning about Joel Embiid, how snippy he was, just not kind of taking things or presenting himself in the way that I feel would be in the best interest for himself and the team here. I think it's weighing on him, and I think this was kind of a window into this is what I'm dealing with. I think Nurse doesn't want to be brought down with the ship here, and that's concerning to me in a lot of ways as well, because I get it. Like, this is a little bit beyond the job description that you would expect as an NBA head coach, but you know what? This is also what comes with the territory, is you're responsible for handling whatever is thrown your way from your superstars, and with the Sixers, we obviously know there's a couple additional wrenches consistently in the mix with that there. So I personally lean towards Nurse doing it. If that is the case, like I have some significant issues with that. And to take it a step, just that out of the conclusion here, I have some significant issues with Nick Nurse just as a coach this year. That I haven't been impressed with just about anything I've seen. I think the rotations have been stale. I think we continue to see this loyalty to the Kyle Lowrys, the Eric Gordons of the world. Eric Gordon, who's look at a lost cause out there to me. And now, granted, I will still throw the caveat on. I do see a world where Eric Gordon could be an effective player playing next to Joel Embiid, but the running him out on the non-Embiid minutes or the games where he does not play makes zero sense to me. We may not have seen Jared McCain have this breakout if it were not for him being forced into that situation. There doesn't seem to be this counters, this creativity. It's just a bad basketball team. And Nurse, you got to wear that one as well. So, Jacob, what are you seeing from Nick Nurse, and are you as critical of him as I'm kind of feeling right now?
Yeah, like I've definitely been very critical of Nick Nurse. I mean, especially on the court. Like when you think about what he brings to this team, like he was advertised as being this creative, like gutsy coach who's known for like these defensive schemes, known to rise in the playoffs, known to try different things and all these types of things. And granted, there's been a lot of crazy stuff that's happened with this team, so we haven't really been able to see that. But still, it just doesn't excuse the poor rotations. You can
Yeah.
even go as early as last night, right? For most of the game, he went with Eric Gordon, and those minutes were terrible. And especially against a team like the Grizzlies, who plays with high energy, always looking to push the pace and dominate the glass. Like it was just a terrible look. And then I even tweeted during the game, why don't you play Ricky Council, a player who could match a team like Memphis's like energy? And of course, sure enough, he does. And
Duncan
Ricky started
everywhere.
giving some positive minutes.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's just so many things, especially on the court. But like you said, if he was the one to leak that, that is catastrophic. That cannot happen. I understand hypothetically he will be frustrated with everything that's going on, but that's exactly how you just lose a locker room. So
Yeah, that is a fireable offense in my mind if you can get concrete evidence that is the case there. Now, I don't expect that to ultimately be. I do think Shams is going to be a die on the sword for his sources there and not reveal who it ever came. We may never know the answer to this one. It may come out over time. We'll see how much of a disaster this season comes. But a couple other points I wanted to hit on with Nick Nurse specifically, like examples of this. Last night, the first time all season we've seen the big three of Tyrese Maxey, Paul George, and Joel Embiid. You closed the first quarter with not a single one of them on the floor. It was Jared McCain being the driving force of the offense. And once again, I do want to circle back to Jared because he's been terrific and I do want to highlight that, but I'm still in the negative mood. So we're sticking here for now. So how can you stick with like not having any of your three stars? That's kind of the point of this big three theme, is that you consistently have one of your all-stars available to carry the offense. And now granted, the game was still very much in reach there. And also Jared McCain played excellent in the stretch, like delivered offensively to where they didn't lose the game over this. But the fact that you're making these decisions is so frustrating me. And the game prior, let's not forget Gershon Yabusele, who just looks every bit of a great rotation player, a totally fine, solid player. No, he's not a world beater, but he's going to give you good minutes. And he's been great so far. He didn't play till the third quarter in that game. So I just don't get it, a lot of the decision-making stuff. And I do think like Nurse at his core plays a pretty simplistic style of basketball. That's not necessarily a critique. That's more just an observation here. You're not going to get these advanced sets. It's a lot of freedom for guys. He allows guys to, play the way they want to play. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but where that gets exposed is when you are shorthanded and you don't have the bread and butter offense here. And we've just seen that completely all year. So it's been very frustrating me not to have any answers for this. Now, to transition to the next guy down the list here, I do want to talk some Paul George. So obviously it is good news that this is only going to be, for now, a 2-day injury or 2-game injury, and he will be reevaluated here. The actual titling stuff certainly rubs me the wrong way here, especially just on the tune of how the team is. I understand. And just on the court as a whole, he hasn't been as advertised so far. Now, we've only seen, I believe, 2 total games without him on a minutes limit, and it was the first play after halftime that he got hurt last night, so it's not like we have this massive sample size. I'm not ready to declare him a lost cause. There's 4 years on the contract. But what are your impressions of Paul George, both as a player and as a person, now that we've seen him a little bit, now that we're in the trenches a little?
There is a lot to unpack with this man. So I'm going to start with what we just found out about the 2-game. So he's going to be reevaluated in 2 games, which is probably the best thing you can hope for at this point, considering that's the same knee he hyperextended like over a month ago. And that's definitely not a good sign in itself that he's tweaking the same knee twice before the month of December when we have a whole 6 months to go. So that is definitely a huge red flag, and that's not an overreaction. That's just something that you kind of have to monitor because we're going to be with this guy for the next 4 years. So that in itself is concerning. But I almost think that this ties in what we were talking about with Nick Nurse, because as soon as I saw that, I said, Gershon Yabusele should unquestionably start over Oubre tomorrow. Yeah. And I just don't think you can make any case to say otherwise. But as far as what we've seen from Paul George, I think largely it's just been inconsistency. I think you could allude that to him being injured and also the minutes restriction that would probably make him struggle to find a rhythm. But still, just the shots, even last night, he was creating great looks, whether it was off the ball or on the ball. It was just awful shot making, and that's kind of what we've seen all season. But off the court, I must say that podcast, it's definitely not what you want to see right now. But I think we don't know when that episode was recorded. It could have been the morning after the Heat game, so we don't know if that was after injuries before. So I don't want to speculate on that, but I could definitely see why fans and NBA Twitter were taken back by this, because it definitely was a little bit odd, especially the way he marketed it as well.
Yeah, and I have not gotten around and listened to it yet. I will, out of curiosity for sure here, but I have not heard exactly what he said. But it is just funny to me to think about the phrase of Joel Embiid, whoever leaked this is POS, and then Paul George, I don't know who leaked it. But anyway, let's talk about it. It's just kind of insane to me and pretty tone deaf in the situation. In the grand scheme of things, all this stuff goes away if you just win basketball games, if you're just doing your job on the floor. I will have no critiques for any of this stuff. You can have as many team meetings, 0 team meetings. You can record as many podcasts as you want if you're just doing your job on the floor. But we haven't really seen that. And the shot making stuff, it's frustrating. I think a lot of times in people's heads, we just have the shot makers of the world that they're going to age well. That's in general not very true. That Paul George has the length and has the capability, but Jamal Murray's an example I'll use right now of a guy that looks to me like he's lost something athletically. His kind of herky-jerkiness, the way that he creates, the quickness, the step there, and you're seeing everything kind of regress from that. Because when you think about it, if you lose a little bit of that separation ability, all of a sudden every shot becomes tougher because the defense is closer, and then you're kind of just making it more difficult on yourself. We lived through the James Harden experience here in a very similar story of what we're talking about here. I don't think Paul George is there, and I am confident saying like when the season progresses, his numbers will reduce to the mean, and we'll see kind of a more typical sample size. He may not shoot the career high rate that he did last season, but I do think that like we'll see something solid there. But I haven't been overly impressed with just kind of like, okay, at least this is the baseline for who this guy is. Like, I think like my expectations for we can get this on a nightly basis. I'm not going to do the Tobias Harris conversations because I think those are overdone at this point. There's still things that he does far better than Tobias, attacking the rim, creating for others. Defensively, he's night and day better. So I'm not going to go down like that rabbit hole here. But I did think like there would be kind of a baseline of expectations for him that I haven't really seen yet. Would you agree with that, Jacob?
I 100% would. And I also want to say that Tobias Harris comparisons are just completely overblown.
Yeah.
I get it. You're frustrated with him, especially because they signed him to a $212 million contract, and he's playing at a Tobias Harris level right now. And that itself and alone like is definitely frustrating. But like you said, Paul George makes up with it with solid perimeter defense that Tobias Harris has never possessed.
Yeah.
He's also loads better as a playmaker, whether it's off the dribble or off the pick and roll. So he's still providing value there, and he also creates much better shots for himself than Tobias kind of ever did. So
Yeah.
there's that. It's just a matter of them falling, which is again another issue in itself that has really been prevalent throughout this whole 2-12 start.
Yeah, 100% there. Now, as far as we'll take a little bit of a positive turn here. Let's talk some Jared McCain. So, kind of one of the lone bright spots of this entire season. I was a Jared McCain guy coming into the draft. Not even in my wildest imagination did I think he could be this good this quick. At 20 years old, we're seeing legitimate playmaking flashes. This dude has been red hot, being the legitimate offensive engine for this team, which is kind of depressing from an overall standpoint that like they're reduced to this, but also shout out to Jared. This is not just a flash in the pan dude putting up good stats on a bad team or, excelling at the opportunity. This is real. This is here. This changes the equation for the Sixers team. So talk to me a little bit about what you're seeing from Jared McCain and your expectations for him from here as the team hopefully returns to full health.
I just first want to say that the fact that we're now using the term non-McCain minutes is just embarrassing, but also a great thing in its own right. But Jared McCain has just completely flattered me. Like
He's awesome.
heading into this season, like we thought his bread and butter would be just the 3-point shot, which it has been, but also his ability to attack the rim has just been unprecedentedly good. Like, especially because that was considered one of his like somewhat weak points heading into the league. He's just been able to do it with such confidence. Like whether it's using screens or just creating for himself, like he plays with such a physical style of play that's really just blown me away. And like this might be an overreaction, but I'm just gonna say it. I think he's probably the best playmaking guard on this team, especially from what we've seen from Maxey these whatever amount of games he's played. Maybe that's an overreaction. Maybe that's me being a little crazy, but I'm gonna stand by it for now because he's really shown that he can play make. And especially in this whole stretch where we've been so shorthanded. Like the way he's just been able to make a stride in the past 2 weeks as a creator has just been so impressive. And I
Yeah.
think he definitely is the rookie of the year favorite right now.
Yeah, totally agree there. And fearless is the number one word that I would say when describing his game. The moment is never too big for him. Even finishing around the rim with taller defenders, the dude just does not care, and it's been really impressive there. I will say that I had a chance to talk to Jared out in Las Vegas for NBA Summer League, and that was one of my questions for him was like, how do you see yourself projecting? Do you see yourself as more of a true point guard role, more of a combo guard? What do you think? And it was interesting the way that he replied is that he said through his entire life, he's been a point guard. Like that's the role that he's been played. At Duke last year, they asked him to play in a little bit more of an off-ball role, and he was more than capable of doing it, shot more than 40% from three, but he's like, basically whatever the team needs from me, I'm totally comfortable with. You see the point guard chops that he has. They pop out. I mean, that no-look pass to Gershon Yabusele leaps out to my brain from last night on the fast break. There's a ton of examples of, like, there's real deal, like, playmaking instincts here from him. So I'm very impressed by that. In the long run, I do think that changes a lot for this Sixers team. Now, a lot of, I would guess, the sticking point for this conversation is the concern of Tyrese Maxey and Jared McCain sharing a backcourt with each other. I don't think either one of them are true traditional point guards or, I think they're both some blend of a combo guard, but I do think McCain is looking like he's going to grow into more of the true point guard type roles. And I do think that they can absolutely play together. I get the defensive concerns, but for me at this point in time, I need to see it. That there's so much offensive juice there that we at least have to try that out. So what's kind of your thoughts on that potential backcourt duo, Jacob?
I mean, could it get any worse? Like this, so that's basically what I'm thinking. Like,
Yeah.
can it truly get any worse? We've seen so many funky and weird rotation decisions by Nick Nurse that, like, what's stopping him? I mean, we saw it a little bit yesterday, but obviously Maxey was on a minutes restriction, so weren't really able to get a solid grasp on what it could actually look like in a real like stretch of games. I think the offensive upside is there, and especially how you talked about Jared McCain can definitely grow into being the lead playmaker, which would definitely make Maxey's life a lot easier, especially playing with a guy like Joel Embiid and Paul George, even though they're both kind of returning to form right now. But still, I think there's a lot of potential there. And in an age where the NBA is so offensive heavy, I really don't think it hurts to try it at least.
Yeah, I totally agree there. And honestly, I'm kind of approaching things from the standpoint right now that as far as the All Star conversation of always having one of Tyrese Maxey, Paul George, and Joel Embiid on the floor, I now kind of look at it as I think, at least in the short term, while you're trying to find a way to win every single game in front of you, which has to be the goal, there should be two of those four on the floor at all times. It'll get a little difficult, especially as Paul George misses the next at least 2 games, and Embiid for sure will have some games that he missed. I mean, even if the goal is to play him every single game from here on out, which frankly I feel should be the goal. We know it's not a realistic one, as things will happen, as even last night that he banged knees, got whacked in the face by Jaren Jackson Jr. Things are going to happen. But the point being here that I think McCain is now a part of that upper echelon of how you consider this team, that he is a guy that is capable of carrying an offense. That's absurd stuff for a rookie, absurd stuff for a 20-year-old, a guy that was in high school 2 years ago and is now doing this against grown men. So pretty insane stuff. I do want to give him his flowers for that. Now, as far as looking down the rest of the roster, not a lot of room for bright spots here. I guess Yabusele would probably be my number 2 bright spot. When looking down the roster as a whole, are there any other guys that stand out to you for being good so far, Jacob? Tough question.
I genuinely have to. Okay, so I'm just kind of scanning through the.
Yeah, there's not a layup here.
I'm not even trying to like be like lack context, but like no, like
Yeah.
there just truly isn't.
Yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at too. So I guess we will be back into the negative mindset here. So I want to bring up Andre Drummond. So there were high hopes for the Andre Drummond signing. He was pretty great in his first stint with the Sixers for the first half of the season that we did get them. I did always feel that he was viewed a little bit more positively than probably deserved to be the case. We never got to see Drummond in a playoff setting, which is really the largest concern for him. But you know what? He's been pretty rough in an expanded role without Joel Embiid to start this season. I've been pretty frustrated with the Drummond just minutes overall. He's not at all backing up his claim of being the best rebounder of all time by any means. And for him to like truly be a net positive on the floor, you basically got to grab every single rebound when you're out there. That has not been the case. There's been some of the typical Drummond trying to do too much. There's just been some ugliness. Hasn't been good on the perimeter. I've hated the Drummond minutes so far this year. Jacob, are you on the same level as me?
It sucks because I wanted to fool myself into thinking that this could work. But when you have a center like Drummond who was unplayable in the playoffs, it's never going to amount to much actual success in winning because obviously, he's great when he gets those offensive rebounds. He's effective off the glass. Like I will say, like Drummond has been inconsistent as a rebounder, but he's done well for the most part the past 2 games, especially on this road trip.
Yeah.
But everything else has just been so mediocre. Like I don't understand why his finishing at the rim is so bad when
Atrocious.
more times than when more times than not he has the height advantage and he's only in one-on-one situations. So some of those misses just flat out unacceptable. And please don't get me started about his pick and roll defense. It is just bad. Drop coverage, any type of coverage, it's just terrible. But the thing that really just stood out to me is the situations that Nick Nurse elects to go with Drummond over like maybe like Yabusele or KJ Morton in the small ball. There was a specific instance against the Grizzlies last night where J Huff stretched out the entire defense,
Yeah.
and it was in that fourth quarter. Embiid played the entire third quarter, so this is like his first few minutes off. Jay Huff straight up exploited him off the perimeter as a center.
Yeah.
He was getting beat multiple times. They were even putting him in like pick and roll actions where then the pick and roll ball handler would pull up and shoot. Like it's been so bad, and I just don't understand as a head coach why you wouldn't try to go smaller and more squish heavy to combat that. So I think a lot of it is just Drummond not being that effective of a basketball player, but also Nick Nurse knowing his own personnel, which he really hasn't, if we're being quite honest.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right there. And I don't think it can continue. I don't think this can be one of those things where he's penciled in as the backup center. I think it has to be a night by night case, at least until he proves that can be the case. The finishing around the rim is like, I can't exaggerate how bad it is. Like, truly one of the worst finishers that I've ever seen. That he makes DeAnthony Melton look like Kyrie Irving around the rim, the way that he finishes stuff there. So I've been really frustrated by the Drummond minutes. I do think Yabusele should be the in most matchups, especially in today's NBA where there's much more five out. And if you do want to share the floor with guys like McCain and Maxey, you got to give him a window to attack as well. So I think Yabusele, to his credit, has just been exactly who he has been from start to finish this year, knocking down 3-pointers. He shot 5 of 6 last night. He's been, he's not the best rebounder in the world, but he's competitive. The dude competes. I've been pretty happy with the Yabusele minutes, and I would like for that to. And by the way, you mentioned KJ Martin. KJ Martin had a pretty excellent start to the season, and then just has been buried on the bench since that. So I don't understand why that is the case. We have more questions than answers than a lot of this, but whatever. To continue progressing down the roster a little bit, I'll group these into two here. I did see a comment, so to highlight this, I understand where you're coming from. Shout out to Teacher Got Game saying, we got to get rid of Caleb or Oubre. They are the same player. I think it's fair to say that both have been a little underwhelming so far. I think it's fair to say that they are similar stylistically in the way they play. I will say for Kelly specifically, the biggest thing I've been disappointed by is I haven't felt this burst of energy every time he's on the floor. I think last night there were flashes of that, particularly on the defensive end. But in general, that to me has got to be Oubre's defining characteristics. If you feel him out there, he changes the tempo of the game. And the shots are going to come and go. That's kind of how the story is for him. For Caleb Martin, I'm a little bit more sympathetic to the fact of he's played well above his head on what his role should be when this team is fully constructed, just about start to finish this year. It is a new team. The shot still looks weird to me. The little leg kick seems far more exaggerated than I think it was in years past, but nonetheless, he's always have a little bit of a weird shot. But what are your thoughts as a whole as both Kelly Oubre and Caleb Martin, and do you have a high level of concern for either of
Sean, I've never been a Kelly Oubre guy.
them?
I
Fair.
think I've used the term multiple times, empty calorie stats, and I'm still claiming that if he's not showing effort defensively, he's almost unplayable. And even this season, he's been very inconsistent as a defender. Some nights he looks great, like in that Phoenix game, he did a very great job on Devin Booker. Some nights just unfocused and gets completely swallowed up on screens. And then you combine that with his just straight up lack of shooting. I think Kelly Oubre missed above the break threes is the new DeAnthony Melton transition layups because I have not seen him make one this season. His shot selection, his awareness has just been terrible offensively. There was even I think it was the final possession of the Grizzlies game yesterday. Embiid was doubled and Oubre was on the weak side. He cuts the basket when there was literally 2 defenders waiting for him rather than just spotting up in the corner. Granted, either one probably wouldn't have been a miss, but you would have had a higher percentage look in the corner. So Kelly Oubre has just been not great. I think you should definitely try to maybe get him out for like a quality backup center at the deadline, assuming you're going to trade KJ for like a quality forward or a guard. So I think that's my final thoughts on him. I'm kind of over the experiment. I don't think it's really going to get better. I'm not trying to be too harsh, but that's genuinely how I feel. As far as Caleb Martin, I think I am a little bit more lenient on him. I'm with you on that simply because of the fact he's been the most consistent and best point of attack defender.
Yeah.
He's tasked with so many like elite guards and wings. So I think I'm a little more sympathetic because he definitely adds value on the defensive end. Offensively, the one thing I completely over with, I don't know if this is a him decision making problem or a Nick Nurse problem. I am tired of seeing the ball in his hands as a ball handler. I am tired of it. I saw it in the first quarter. There's Paul George, Tyrese Maxey, and Joel Embiid out there. There is no reason why Caleb Martin should have the ball and running a pick and roll or attempting to drive to the rim. That just cannot happen.
Yeah.
And even off the ball, I've been a little disappointed. His like lack of knowing when to cut. We saw it a few times. Like there was a few times where he was cutting and then just like kind of stopped around the baseline. It was in this awkward area. It almost gave me Ben Simmons reminders. So it was just, his whole offensive game is definitely just hasn't been great. But defensively, he adds value. So I've been a little bit more lenient, but still, you definitely want to see more.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. I will say, like, in his defense a little, I think he's gotten a ton of grenades at the end of the shot clock, meaning you get the ball with like 5 seconds left and basically got to figure something out. And he's not the guy for that. Like, that's not who he's branded as. That's not who he thinks he is. Those should be opportunities for the Tyrese Maxeys, the Paul Georges of the world. I feel a little bit, I guess, bad for Caleb to some extent for the way that he's been used this year. And I still do see the vision of when this team is complete, when they are fully healthy, of where he fits into this as a very effective player. So I'm leaving the jury out at this point. I'm not ready to be upset about Caleb Martin. I'm a little more frustrated on the Oubre side of things there. So we'll see how that overall plays out. I think we need a little bit more of a sample size there. Are there any other bench players that you would say have stood out to you for any reason? Any guys that you want to dig into here as far as Kyle Lowry, Eric Gordon? You take it where you want to take it here, Jacob.
How much time we got? But I tweeted this yesterday. The Sixers, well, they have a lot of problems, but I said the Sixers have a backup point guard problem because when you look at Kyle Lowry, he for the first like maybe 3 or 5 games, he was statistically, I mean, the eye test backed it up too, but he was the best spot up shooter. He
Yeah.
was shooting them in such a great clip, but for some reason, that's the only way he's being utilized. Like I've been seeing when he was healthy, I've seen so many like sets where he's coming off these double screens. I'm like in my mind, why the hell are we running plays for Kyle Lowry when like Tyrese Maxey and McCain and Embiid are on the floor?
Yeah.
Like it's just jarring to me. So the way he's being used as a spot up shooter and how inconsistent he's been since those first few games, it has not played well at all. He's regressed as a ball handler. He's regressed as like a facilitator, and he's just almost been unplayable at this point. Eric Gordon's another one. I know we touched on him a little bit earlier, but his poor shooting and well, I mean, if he's not shooting the ball, he's not adding any other type of value. Those minutes have swung games. We saw it against the Heat, especially. Reggie Jackson, he had that spurt against the Cavs where he showed he can be that scorer in bunches, but largely inconsistent, unplayable. So when you have those mix of guys in your guard rotation in the year 2024, it's not going to go well, and it hasn't.
Yeah, I think Reggie Jackson playing about equal minutes on the Sixers floor and as Paul George's co-host on a podcast is kind of fitting at this point because that is the case as he was featured on today's episode that is making some waves there. So yeah, I guess like for each of these guys, I still in a similar conversation to Caleb Martin that they've all been playing above their head as far as role. Each of these guys being asked to do more than they should, and that is directly upon the Joel Embiid not being around, the injury to Paul George, the injury to Tyrese Maxey. The list continues there. But the reality is that is the situation. The NBA waits for no man, and this team has to continue powering on, and that's the position the Sixers find themselves in. So looking at these standings once again, 2-12, the worst team in the entire NBA. They have to go on a tear here. So let's talk how to fix this. Jacob, what are the biggest things you would say moving forward? Is there a lineup switch that you would make? Is it just getting this team on the same page? Any offensive corrections? If you're Nick Nurse walking into the room tomorrow, what is it you have to say to the Sixers team, and what are those moves that you are going with?
I mean, they just have to get help. Like the big three needs to be on the floor. We can't have a version of the 2021 Brooklyn Nets where we don't even make the playoffs.
Yeah.
Like just having that big three on the floor together is truly everything. Like what they play 6 minutes last night.
6. Yep, 6 total.
Okay, so you look at these next few games, they're going to be without Paul George. But then even when they get Paul George back, let's be optimistic because I don't know who they play, and then I know they play Brooklyn. I forget who they play next. So let's say they go 1-1, right? What's
Mm-hmm.
this? So 3-13, and then well, we're gonna magically just figure it out and win 15 straight. Like it's just I'm not very optimistic because building chemistry takes time, and you know Embiid's gonna eventually inevitably miss some games. So it just seems like this entire season is going to be an uphill battle. And the only thing that's saving the Sixers right now is geography and being in the Eastern Conference. Because if
Yeah.
they were in the West, I would genuinely be smashing the panic button right now. But as far as Nick Nurse and the rotations, I think Yabusele needs to start. I'm actually no, I'm gonna take that back. I'm gonna be 100% honest. I think it depends on the matchup,
Mm-hmm.
but I think most of the time Yabusele should start because I really liked what I've seen, especially in that unit with like McCain and Embiid and Yabusele. He's just been great on both ends, playing with a lot of energy. So I definitely want to see him start, especially in these non-Paul George games. But I think just being more crisp with the rotation, whether it's playing KJ more, playing Ricky Council more, just giving the opportunity to more guys who can provide different things than just shooting, which guys like Reggie Jackson, Kyle Lowry, and Eric Gordon just simply cannot right now. But I think the backup point guard problem is definitely just something they're going to have to deal with, healthy or not, because even though I love Jeff Dowden, he's Sixers two-way summer league legend. is not playing at the NBA level right now. So I think that's just not really fixable unless they make some sort of a move.
Yeah, I to be honest, the biggest switch to me, I mean, it's obviously all internal. That this is the team. These are the guys you've chosen. This is the roster that has been built. There is not a knight in shining armor coming flying into this organization anytime soon. They're going to have to grit through that. And as Steven points out in the comments, they have not been good when adversity has struck in recent years. So that is something that absolutely needs to change. For me, this starts with Joel Embiid, that we've been, in general, pretty sympathetic for everything leading up to this. I bought in on the plan. I was whatever, don't press the knee. Even dating back to his career, how often that we've stuck up for Joel. None of this changes until he's the guy leading the force here. That it has to be him both as a leader and as a player locked in from here on out. I need to see when they step on the floor tomorrow, Joel look like this is my team, because it is, man. It still is, regardless of who the other players are. I'm not a believer that the best player necessarily needs to be the leader. I don't think that's true in all cases, but that doesn't mean he doesn't have to carry himself like a professional and be locked in here. So that kind of stuff, I'm glad it was put on the table at the early part of the season. As I mentioned, there is still 83% of the season remaining for the Sixers here. But I won't lie, if my panic meter hasn't shifted up pretty significantly since the start. So I approached this season with the mindset there was zero world in which the Sixers team could miss the playoffs. And you can check my receipts on here. I do have a little wager going down that if they do, I will be replicating Jared McCain TikToks myself. That's my kind of call to action there. So hopefully that is not the case. I won't lie. I think there's a way stronger probability of that than I ever initially thought was possible. So do you think there's a world where this team could miss the playoffs this year? And I guess, where is it that the line is drawn in the sand where this is an official lost season? What is the breaking point for you, Jacob?
I think they're definitely going to make the playoffs,
Love
but
it.
if not, it's going to take. Well, I mean, I think they're going to be in the play-in, but I think
Sure.
they'll be able to thug it out there. But I think this could either be that, or it could be another version of the 2022 Lakers. Like it's just weird roster construction. Everyone's in and out in the lineup, and it's just internal chaos. Obviously, I hope it doesn't go that route, but still, there's a chance that could happen. But I want to be optimistic. I want to say this team has enough talent to get it together. It's just about establishing that culture, and that kind of goes back to Nick Nurse and Joel Embiid, who really haven't really shown any type of spark of leadership, of fight, or anything. Obviously, we're not in the locker rooms. We don't know what Embiid's like with the team and like a more personal level, but we just have not seen enough in terms of leadership, especially out of Nick Nurse and Embiid on the floor.
Yeah, and they just simply put, they just have to be better than these teams. You have to be better than Toronto Raptors. You have to be better than the Washington Wizards, the Detroit Pistons, the Chicago Bulls. These are not teams that you should have any business losing to or having worse records than. I understand the injuries, all these other factors that we've dove into already, but this just got to be wake up time, man. This has got to be everybody look each other and look themselves in the mirror, look at each other and say, we got to be better as a group. Because as I mentioned at the beginning part of this, I do truly feel this is a point the finger at every single member of the team here. Every guy has some sort of blame in this. No one is excluded. Even the guys that we praise here. Jared McCain, I might look at it as excluded. That's probably my one exception here. But even still, he's a part of this whole piece here. So every guy's got to be better. It's got to happen quick. I do think this next 4-game homestand will really be pretty defining for the season. Now, these are each winnable games, and I'm forgetting offhand. I know the Rockets is one of the games. I thought last night was one of the ones that I was counting. The Nets are obviously tomorrow. So this has to start immediately, that they have to find a way to win games immediately. The Nets, who, by the way, have been playing quietly pretty good basketball, this has to be like a clear-cut victory for the Sixers team tomorrow. I thought last night said a lot. I knew it was going to, and I wasn't impressed with how they came out. So for me, if we don't start seeing a spark within this next 4 games, we may seriously be talking about this being an absolute lost season. And where the conversation gets interesting there, it is the top 6 protected pick. That for all the tank people out here, it only works. The Sixers only get the selection if it's one of the top 6 picks in the draft. Otherwise, it goes to the Oklahoma City Thunder. I do really feel that in Daryl Morey's calculations, that he is going to view this team has a better chance of winning a championship coming out of the play-in tournament than they would at potentially getting a 1 pick if this team completely bottoms out. Do you agree with that calculation there, Jacob? And do you think there's any world where this turns into a tank season?
No, there's definitely no chance they tank whatsoever, and people who genuinely believe so really need to snap back into reality because as much as I would love the Sixers to land, generational talent like Ace Bailey or Cooper Flag, it's not going to happen, and Daryl Morey will not let that happen.
Yeah.
So I think for the tanking, just it needs to stop. But I think these next few games are really important. You look at this Nets team; they're also banged up. I know Daron Sharp is going to be out. A few guys are quite. I know Dorian Finney-Smith is questionable, but as we saw with that game against the Grizzlies, injury reports really don't matter with this team apparently.
Yeah.
So I think it's just a level of focus, a level of fight that they need to play the full 48 minutes, which is something we just have not seen. We see them lay down again and again when stuff gets tough, especially in third quarters. So I think it's just a matter of just consistency. And you mentioned that they play the Rockets. I'm not looking forward to that whatsoever between the duo of Tari Eason and Ben Thompson and how hard they crash the boards. That's going to be a nightmare of a matchup, especially right now. So definitely scared against them, but they do have some winnable games on the schedule that there really just is no excuse to lose.
Yeah, a lot more questions than answers for this Sixers team at this point in time, but it was nice to air things out here, Jacob. So I think we'll put a wrap on today. Do you have any final thoughts as far as this team as a whole?
I think I kind of hit on everything. It's just about consistency and be kind of showing some more fight. Team not giving up when things get hard and another team goes on a run. And it's just about gaining chemistry too. They just need to get healthy. They just need to get everything rolling. Like even though Kyle Lowry is back, like you just need to get healthy. Whether it's Kyle Lowry, like you just need 100% health because you need to develop an identity. Because we're already approaching December. We're already approaching like the final stages of the NBA Cup. So it's just something that needs to get figured out much sooner than later, especially because Embiid will inevitably miss some games. You just need to establish some sort of identity.
Yeah, 100% there. And appreciate each and every one of you guys coming and hanging in the comments. We hope this therapy session was as helpful for you guys as it was for Jacob and myself here. A lot of seasons still to go. So I'm not ready to fully wave the white flag, but there's got to be a quick turnaround. This has to happen in the short term. This is not anything that you can let linger get any further. I did not believe this bad of a start was possible, but that is the world that we are living in. So Jacob, any other thoughts as far as what you got going on? I know you're cranking out content for your Twitter page, Jacob Moreno NBA, I believe it is, and everything else you got. So plug yourself. What are you working on?
I'm actually you're getting some early access right here. I'm actually making a Substack, so
Awesome.
probably gonna drop that tomorrow, and continue my Sixers coverage articles and stuff like that. I'll have some more freedom and creativity to do some like analytical pieces and stuff like that. So I'm really looking forward to that, and I'll actually be credentialed for a few Blue Coats games. So look for some occasional Blue Coats game coverage here and there. So yeah,
Yeah.
and of course covering this wonderful basketball team, the Sixers too. So.
Awesome. Love to see it. And it's always awesome checking out the Blue Coats, too. Really good people down there running everything. And they'll bend over backwards with opportunity on that type of stuff. So really cool stuff. Definitely recommend everybody going and checking out games down there when you get the chance. As always, appreciate each and every one of you guys tuning in and hanging with us on here. Make sure you're smashing that subscribe button if you have not already. Drop a like on this video and keep it coming in the comments. Appreciate you guys bouncing some things off us throughout the show, and some final thoughts and final comments. Appreciate each and every one of you guys chiming in here. So we will talk to you next time. Me and Jacob will be back chopping it up about the Sixers team, hopefully in higher spirits than is currently the